Written as a single flowing narrative plain paragraph with emotional twists, cinematic tone, and a powerful USA/UK style hook plus subscribe request at the beginning. Crafted perfectly for an official music video storytelling format. Before the music begins, listen closely. In a world where society decides who you're allowed to love, one couple dared to choose the impossible. Set in the golden streets of 1960s Italy, where tradition ruled hearts and judgment whispered through every cafe, this is not just a love story. This is a rebellion. A romance that defied age, time, and destiny itself. If you believe love has no expiration date, if you believe the heart doesn't ask for permission, then subscribe now, because stories like this don't just entertain, they stay with you forever. The summer of 1962 arrived in the coastal town of Positano like a slow-burning dream. Sunlight spilling over pastel houses stacked against the cliffs, the air thick with salt, espresso, and secrets, and it was there that Lucia Moretti first noticed him standing alone near the harbor, an older man with silver beginning to touch his dark hair, his posture calm but heavy with memories, as though life had already asked too much of him, and Lucia, only 21, vibrant, restless, and suffocating under the expectations of her family, felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest, not desire at first but recognition, the strange feeling that some souls meet long before they ever speak, and his name was Alessandro Vitali, 46 years old, a widowed composer who had returned to Italy after decades abroad, carrying a piano score no one had ever heard and grief no one could see, and when their eyes met across the sunlit pier, neither smiled, neither spoke, yet something irreversible began, because in that moment time itself seemed to pause, as if unsure which of them it belonged to. Lucia's days were already planned by others. Marriage to a respectable young man, children before 30, obedience wrapped in lace and church bells, but her nights were filled with music drifting from Alessandro's rented villa above the cliffs, melodies that sounded like longing given breath, and each evening she found herself walking farther from home, drawn upward by notes that understood her better than anyone ever had, until one night she stood at his gate, trembling not from fear but from truth, and when Alessandro opened the door and saw her there under the moonlight, he knew immediately how dangerous this would become, because he had promised himself never again to love, never again to ruin someone's future with his past, yet Lucia spoke first, softly, saying she didn't come for him. She came for the music, and that lie was gentle enough for them both to accept. Their conversations began cautiously, about art, about Rome, about how silence can be louder than words, but beneath every sentence lived what they refused to name, and as weeks passed the town began to notice, the glances, the walks, the way Lucia laughed more freely near him, the way Alessandro looked at her as if she reminded him why he once believed in beauty. Whispers crept through markets and pews, cruel and sharp, because in 1960s Italy love was allowed only within strict borders, and theirs had crossed every one, and when Lucia's mother discovered the truth she wept not from anger but shame, warning her daughter that the world would never forgive a woman who loved an older man, that people would say she was lost, corrupted, foolish, while Alessandro would be called lucky, forgiven, untouched, and that injustice burned inside Lucia until she realized love had always demanded courage, never permission. The turning point came during the town's annual summer festival, when Alessandro's unfinished composition was performed publicly without his consent, stolen by a rival seeking fame, and the crowd applauded a piece born from grief and rebirth without knowing its origin, and Lucia saw Alessandro's hands shake as decades of silence collapsed into humiliation, and in front of everyone she took his hand, a single gesture that detonated scandal, and in that instant she chose him not as a secret, not as a mistake, but as her truth. The aftermath was merciless. Her engagement ended, her family turned distant, doors once open now closing softly but firmly, while Alessandro was offered escape. A contract in Paris, a return to safety, but leaving meant abandoning the one thing that had made his heart beat again, and on the night before his departure they stood overlooking the sea, the same place they first met, both knowing love sometimes arrives not to stay but to transform. And with tears unspoken Lucia told him she would not ask him to sacrifice his life for hers, and he replied that loving her had already given his life meaning again. And then fate intervened cruelly when Lucia fell ill that winter, exhaustion and heartbreak collapsing her strength, and Alessandro returned at once, ignoring reputation, ignoring reason, sitting by her bedside composing softly so she could sleep. And when she finally opened her eyes weeks later and saw him there, she understood love was not about age or time but presence. Who stays when everything else leaves? Years passed, the town softened, judgment growing tired, and while they never married in a church nor sought approval, they lived quietly together above the cliffs, music filling the house, laughter aging them both gently. And when Lucia grew older she realized something profound. That Alessandro had not taken her youth, he had protected it, allowed it to become wisdom instead of regret. And when he passed away many years later, the town gathered not in scandal but respect, listening as his final composition played across the harbor, credited at last to his name, dedicated simply to the woman who taught time to wait. And Lucia, now silver-haired herself, stood by the sea where it all began, smiling through tears, knowing the world had been wrong. Because love had never belonged to age at all, only to courage.